All right, welcome to the New Orleans Saints Syndicate version of Under the Dome. We've got a full house tonight. I've got my partner Sean Williams. I've got Mr. Life of a Saint himself, John Butler from beautiful downtown New York, and Mr. Bayou Blitz, Sports Illustrated, Crescent City Chronicles. I know I'm going to miss one of them.
And also, after a couple of years hiatus, this is our last show before Valentine's Day, and we brought you guys the Valentine Rose.
Oh, God. You've been thinking about that joke all day, too.
Yes, I have. I really have. Why do you think I scheduled it for this night?
That's the worst part of this. And okay, so Mr. Bob Rose, and since Sean mentioned the shout out, here's my shout out. Shout out to all the maids who have to clean the sheets on February 15th. As we get started,
and butlers.
Yeah.
All right, so we were talking off the air just before we came on, and who actually watched the Super Bowl? How many of you guys actually watched it?
I did. I had to. I was here at work.
Yeah.
I did, and it was the first time in 3 years that I have watched it, and it pretty much unfolded kind of how I thought it would. The final score notwithstanding, I thought all week long that Tampa Bay would dominate the way they did, and I thought they'd win the game.
Sure.
How about you, John?
Yeah, I stuck it out just because I knew I'd be on this on this podcast. So I blame you guys for that. But
thank you.
But yeah, same here. It's like there was it kind of seemed like the narrative was going in that direction, and then you add the injuries, and then you add the off the field stuff, and then you add it just it added up to exactly what we saw, which was pretty brutal.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I got so sick of hearing it, but there's absolutely, as much as it pains me to say this, there's no substitute for experience ever, especially at this level. And when you got when you got Tom Brady in the Super Bowl, he's going to come for the party. I mean, and he did. He, as much as I despise his very existence, he played a good game. And he was the player that they needed that day.
You know, I honestly was sitting there thinking about how many Tom Brady Super Bowls I really actually watched from beginning to end. And it's only two of them. And it was his first two. I watched him versus the Rams in 2001 in the Superdome. Yep. And I watched the one in Houston when he played the Carolina Panthers because of Jake Delhomme. But the other ones I really the closest I came to seeing another complete Super Bowl with Brady was probably the Giants one, Super Bowl 42, the first one.
Yeah.
But I was at Bacchus Roll that night. So I was at Bacchus Parade, and we just kept walking over. They had a bar with TV screens face out in the street. So I just kept walking over to the bar and watching the game right there because we were just waiting for the parade. Parade hadn't shown up yet. So I just walk over there and watch some more of the game and come back and hang out with my family, and no parades. I'm walking back to see what's going on with the game. But it's always been like the first Patriots Eagles. I was in Disney World that weekend, so I didn't see that game at all. The Rams game, of course, we all boycotted because that was the Super Bowl we should have been in. The Eagles game, I think I turned it on because near halftime because the Eagles were winning, and I wanted to watch Brady lose. But I didn't see the second one, the second Giants Patriots game, and only saw the second half. No, I'm sorry. When Atlanta had the 25-point lead, that's when I happened to turn on that Super Bowl because I was not going to watch Atlanta win that game. And my wife came running up. She said, because she was following on Twitter. She says, they're starting to lose. New England's coming back. I'm like, okay, let me go watch this for a little while. And ended up really enjoying that one. But, yeah, I mean, I'm kind of like you, Bob. I really haven't sat and watched many recent Super Bowls. And I was somebody who would watch the damn blowout ones of the late 80s and early 90s.
Yeah.
I think it's more of a habit, really. We follow the game so much that most of the time, I think it doesn't really matter who's playing in it. It's the Super Bowl. And also it's the last football game for 9 months. So,
right, and I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that in years prior, we knew we weren't going to be in the Super Bowl. So
yeah,
we weren't going into it brokenhearted. It was just whoever was playing that game. But the last few years have been particularly rough.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I agree with that. The Saints getting so close so many times, you kind of just don't want to watch it because you're looking at this game going, they could have won this game. Whether or not they really could have, you still feel like they could have won this one. They could have beat whoever they're playing.
Drew Brees is going to show up for the Super Bowl. They couldn't have beat us.
Right. And I'm somebody who sits there and watches the old NFL films of, especially the ones that John Facenda did. I'll watch those.
Oh God.
Yeah. I've said this before. When I die and if I get into heaven and God doesn't sound like John Facenda, I'm really disappointed.
Yep. So let me put a question before you guys. We see this news story come out during the week about Drew Brees restructuring his contract. I wanted to get you guys' thought on it. Do y'all think that this is an absolute definitive indication that he's done?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. And yeah, you guys know, I thought coming into the year that this would probably be his last year.
Yeah, absolutely. I did too.
By mid-season, I was convinced of it. And by the end, I thought, okay, this is a little past time now. And we've all rehashed those conversations and questions over and over again. But yeah, Sean, I think Drew doing what he did to free up some of the Saints salary cap space for 2021. I think that was just icing on the cake. It was his kind of last wave goodbye into the sunset. And make no mistake about it, viewers that are tuning in, and thank you for tuning in. Drew's still going to get that money. It's just going to be spread over the next couple of years, which means that he's going to be part of the Saints salary cap for the next couple of years. But because of what Drew agreed to and what the Saints at the front office was able to do with him, the salary cap hits are going to be minuscule compared to what they could have been. But yeah, I absolutely think that this was his way of saying, okay, guys, you go do what you need to do. Thank you for everything you've done for me, and this is one last gift for you.
Yeah, absolutely. John?
I'm just gonna agree with whatever Bob says because he's smarter than I am. So, no, yeah,
that's the same dynamic that has made this show work for over 3 years now. I just defer to Alan.
Just keep nodding your head.
Yeah, yeah.
No, yeah, I definitely agree. I kind of expected something like that to happen. I didn't know when it was going to happen, but once it did, then yeah, it kind of confirmed that what we all thought was coming from a year ago is that this was going to be Drew's last year. And like Bob said, it was just one last way to give back to the Saints for all they did for him. So,
well, see, a lot of friends and acquaintances that I have, anytime just like with you guys, anytime they have questions and something like this happens with the Saints, they always come to me and ask me, does this mean that he's coming back? And I'm like, no, it means the opposite. Alan, how about you?
Well, Nick Underhill broke down what the Saints needed to do to get under the cap tonight. And basically one of the first moves that had to be made was they had to convert Drew Brees' salary into signing bonuses that they could prorate over the rest of the contract. And that's exactly what they did. And they're going to split this now. I think it's $11.5 million this year, this coming cap 2021, and $11.5 million in 2022. And I think this was because when you retire, the money just doesn't go away. That's what some people think that, when a player gets traded or retires, that you just kind of do this with his salary and you now clear all this cap space. It doesn't work that way.
No, not at all.
So when he did this, to me, that was one of the first steps to show that he was going to retire. I mean, everyone's seen the videos by now of him in the Superdome that one last time, looking back at the stadium, him holding Brittany, all that thing. So all these are steps I expected to see him take going into a retirement. So I think in the next couple of weeks, we'll probably see Breeze make an official announcement that he does retire, and he'll turn his retirement papers in after June 1st.
Which again is another move to help the team.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was funny on Twitter, you started seeing, okay, Jerry's in there by himself and he feels bad because we got an early start. So he's yelling out to everybody, wondering where everybody is.
I completely forgot to post something about it until this afternoon.
Then I can't get on here from my work computer now, so I have to wait till I get home. So unfortunately, I didn't give it much time for a heads up. But when they did this and restructured the deal, all the people who don't understand how Loomis works, the salary cap, were all like, yeah, now the Saints going to have to pay the bills. They're going to have to blow apart this team. They're going to get rid of Michael Thomas, going to get rid of Alvin Kamara and Cam Jordan. They're not going to have any talent left, and they're going to be the dregs. Well, Loomis does this first thing with Breeze and clears about $25 million off of that $100 million that was sort of over the cap. And I'm reading things like the NFL needs to investigate the Saints. You can't do this. They're the only team that seems to get away with this stuff. How do they do this? They're doing something under the table. No, this is Loomis math.
Hey, don't mess with the team from the land of the voodoo.
So I guess that leads into the next question here. And yes, Jerry, absolutely. They're used to coming in at 8:00 to tune in. So they're going to start trickling in a little bit.
Yeah, we wanted, for just so I can go ahead and get this out of the way, we have a loose-knit organization amongst us because all of us in one shape, form, or fashion or another cover the Saints. And we're all very, very good friends. And we put together this group, and it didn't have a name. And I was watching TV one night, and they were talking about the Mafia, and I said, we are now the New Orleans Saints Syndicate. We run this show. And that's how the name came about. And it consists of the four of us. Absolutely. You can get in, but you never get out.
Every time you think you're out, they just pull you back.
Pulls you back in.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah.
We all are, like I said, we're all very, very close friends. I believe I could speak for everybody by saying that. We all steadfastly support each other in all the different avenues and ventures that we make in terms of covering the New Orleans Saints. And I'm glad we could get everybody on tonight.
So we're kind of a Goodfellas, Godfather kind of combination. So you be the Joe Pesci character in this scenario?
Me?
Yeah.
No.
The one everybody thinks is funny. Funny how? How am I funny? I make you laugh. And Bob would be like Sonny Corleone here before he gets shot to hell. Is that right?
Bob, you got an untimely demise coming, brother.
Yeah. Got the temper.
Yeah, that is about right. And the demise, Sean, it's been overdue for 30 years. So.
and John is our conciliere. He's kind of like
Robert Duvall. Not bad.
Duvall character.
I thought I was going to be Fredo.
Consigliere, by the way.
Consigliere, that's what it is. Yeah. No, you're not Fredo. There's nobody's Fredo here.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. I'm smart.
So that leaves you. You're not getting out of this.
He's the Godfather.
No, I'm
There
not.
you
the
go.
Godfather. I am not the Godfather. I'm more like Mo Green sometimes.
I'm sorry. I interrupted your train of thought a while ago.
No, that's okay. I was just going to lead into the next thing, and this is really going to be directed at Bob. So Underhill has put this stuff out, but I wanted to get your opinion on this. What other moves do you foresee the Saints making to get under the $100 million that they allegedly are over for the cap?
There's a handful that I see coming, guys. First and foremost, if Quan Alexander is going to be in a New Orleans Saint uniform next season, it's going to be at nowhere near the $13 million cap hit that he is at. There's a handful of other guys. I hate, and Saints fans. Alan was right earlier when he was kind of making fun of the ones that that were saying they're going to blow this thing up. It's not going to happen. But do not be surprised if we see some beloved players depart. My eye is on Thomas Morstead. You cannot pay a punter $4.2 million. I don't care how good he is. And remember, they brought in Blake Gillikin, who they thought extremely highly of as an undrafted rookie last year. So much so that they actually protected him by putting him on injured reserve. So while Morstead will be back, could be back if he's not a cap casualty. Again, he's got to agree to a restructure. Guy like Cam Jordan, who I think has the third highest cap hit on the team going into 2021, he's going to have to restructure. Ditto for a guy like Teron Armstead. There's some other guys. Recently signed contracts such as Michael Thomas, Demario Davis. Mickey Loomis is infamous for going back to those guys about a year or so after they've signed a new deal and saying, okay, we're not trying to take money from you, but we're going to juggle the numbers a little bit. We're going to kind of prorate, some of this signing bonus that has left, that kind of thing. A guy like Malcolm Brown, who I think's so undervalued for that run defense. And defensive tackle core. I think he's due to count like $6.5 million against the cap next year. So a guy like that, do not be surprised if the Saints release him while conferring with their agent, saying we'll bring you back at a lower cost or something like that. Or I think Malcolm Brown is an example of a guy that has 1 year left on his deal that they'll quickly move to try to get extended for maybe a 3-year contract while they push the current money back into the new deal, that kind of thing. And there's a lot of economics that are going to be involved. And I will I will die on the battle hill, saying this team will put a competitive product onto the field, but we're going to see some different faces and we're going to see a lot of contract restructures.
I agree with that. John,
I do too.
Do you see any surprise moves that the Saints may make? Just throwing that out there.
Surprise moves. I'm sure there will be, but I'm trying to think of one that I could come up with off the top of my head. Honestly, I'm hoping a surprise move is quarterback, because as much as everybody on social media loves Jameis Winston, I am not a believer. I hope he changes me, but I am not a believer. So I'm hoping that's one of them. But
unless something miraculously just appears out of the clear blue, I really and truly believe in my heart of hearts that going into camp next year, it's going to be Winston and obviously Taysom. But I think that's going to be the battle for the starting quarterback. I don't see any other you don't have the money or the draft stock to make a run at one of these established veterans that are moving around. I can't see any way other than those two guys being your focus going into camp. You guys might not agree with that, though.
I'll say two things real quick, and then I apologize in advance. I got to jump off for a conference call, but I will be back. As far as quarterback goes, I do think that it's probably going to be Jameis Winston, but there's a lot of moving parts here. If the Saints make a deal for one of these big name guys, a Dak Prescott, Deshaun Watson, even Russell Wilson that's out there in the wind now, That's the only way that you're going to see the core of this team change, because there are going to have to be some players involved. But as far as a surprise move, don't be surprised if Emmanuel Sanders is a surprise cut. I'm not saying he played poorly, but yeah, he's a vet guy. We know Sean Payton likes to build his receiving core through the draft. They really like Marquez Callaway. Deontay Harris gave us a glimpse of what I think is going to be the tip of the iceberg of what he can do. So a guy like Emmanuel Sanders, who carries a high cap hit, like 8.5 or maybe 9 million next year, he could be a surprise cut. And your quarterback room, if I'm a betting man right now, and I'll throw this nugget out there before I come back, I do agree with you, Sean, that I think it's going to be Jameis Winston. And Taysom Hill is going to be on the roster. I expect the Saints to draft one too, and that's going to possibly that might be where our trade comes from, where they might move in to the higher part of the first round to draft a quarterback of the future. But he will not be the starter in 2021.
No, I don't.
Well,
that was kind of what I was pointing towards when I said something miraculously out of the blue. Of course, if they draft somebody, that will alter that. But to be honest with you, outside of possibly, and this is going to be a generous estimate, I would say outside of possibly maybe 3 guys in this draft, I don't see a franchise quarterback that's standing there saying, "Hey, take me." Obviously, you got Trevor Lawrence and you got the kid from Ohio State, which, to be honest, I think he's going to be not what everybody expects him to be. But I really don't see any bright and shiny toys beyond that.
Well, you got the kid from BYU and you got the kid from North Dakota State. So that's probably about your sum total of true first-round talent. That's in.
But like Alan has alluded to on this show before, hang on, I had a brain fart. All of these legitimate tenured starters that are moving around, your Jared Goff, your this and that, all these guys that are moving around are going to completely shake up the draft in terms of drafting quarterbacks, because you're not going to make a move to get a Matt Stafford and give up the kind of draft capital that you did to get him and then draft a guy.
And Bob had to go, and I wanted to tell him to think about this before he comes back, who he thinks that the Saints would take in the first round if they go to make a move for a quarterback. But that's what's interesting about all this, these quarterback moves, that these teams a lot of teams are calling about veteran quarterbacks now. I mean, Sam Darnold supposedly is now on the market because it looks like the Jets are going to take whichever quarterback the Jaguars do not take. So if the Jaguars take Lawrence, they'll go for the Ohio State quarterback. And
I believe that's going to be Trevor Lawrence, if for no other reason. The most obvious and glaring reason. I mean, he played at Clemson, and it's about putting asses in the seats.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But where it really starts getting interesting is, okay, so what do the 49ers do? Do the 49ers go and make a move because they're unhappy with Garoppolo? Do they go ahead and make a move and try and pick up Carson Wentz or a Watson who Houston keeps insisting is not available? Or do they go get Russell? I can't see there's any way they can get Russell Wilson, because not only
I don't think Russell ever leaves Seattle.
I don't believe he does either. I think that's
just like everybody talking. That's just like everybody talking about Green Bay ready to cut bait with Aaron Rodgers. How you gonna cut loose a guy that just won the league MVP? That is ludicrous. That makes sense. I don't care what you did in the draft last year. You don't turn loose of a franchise quarterback with the skill set and the ability and the accomplishments of an Aaron Rodgers. You just don't do it.
Right. Well, I would not be surprised then if they go ahead and try and trade who they drafted last year, Jordan Love.
Sure.
Um,
If one of them is going to be leaving this year, it'll be him. I guarantee you that.
no different than what the Patriots did with Brady and Garoppolo.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
Make a move, you trade the guy, knowing that I can get another good year out of Rodgers, an MVP year, get another good year out of Rodgers. Now go get a quarterback next year, or I get a quarterback in this draft.
Well, let me ask you guys. What you just you were just talking about with Bob, or what you had wanted to say to Bob.
Mm-hmm.
What quarterback, if you had the ability to trade up, who would you want?
Well, John, do you have an opinion on this?
I look. I mean, I'm not super into college football, but what I've seen from some of the guys that are like the headliner guys, I don't know that any of them are going to completely translate into the NFL the way some of these guys in the front of the draft hope they will. As far as like, I keep seeing the name, what is it, Mac Jones?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Alabama.
Out of Alabama. I keep seeing him tied to the Saints. I don't know if that's just because that's where he happens to fall in everybody's list, and that's right around where the Saints pick or what. But, any of the guys that I've seen this year, I'm not super in love with, so I wouldn't – I know they're always looking to trade up, but I don't know if I would trade up for a quarterback.
See, that's the reason that I don't – how do I say this diplomatically? That's the reason that I don't really follow college football anymore, because you'll have this guy that's playing quarterback in college. Just for an example, say a Mac Jones. And this is not knocking on him at all. I'm just using his name as an example. You sit there and you watch what he does, how successful he is at the college level. What people don't realize and don't seem to accept is that does not automatically transition into success in the National Football League. And that's how I look at college players. Okay, which of these guys are going to be able to help my team at the next level? And if I don't see anything that translates like that, then I lose interest in it. I don't know that much about Mac Jones, or I mean, obviously, of all the guys that are out there this draft class, the one that I've seen the most is Trevor Lawrence. And I've seen some things about him that are negative. Not a lot. I don't.
Well,
go ahead.
With Mac, the problem with Mac Jones is you don't know how much of this is the system he's playing in, the offensive line he's playing behind, the level of talent he has around him as in the running back core, in the receiving core. I mean, this is Alabama's players a lot of times look like they are just part of a sum of a great team, and you don't know if you take this one piece out, except for receiver, which we've seen this, but if you take this one piece out and put it in another kind of team or another kind of program, how well he could play. We'll have to see where Mac Jones falls after his pro days, after the combine, all these things, because right now he looks like a second or third round pick.
To be honest, and you guys know, going into the draft last year, I was steadfast in my resolve that I would not have wasted a high draft pick for Tua, because it was too big of a risk to me. And I mean, all he did was come in and have a spectacular rookie season.
Mm-hmm. And Mac Jones isn't very tall either. He's only 6'2", which is taller than Drew Brees, but I don't know if he has the talent of a Drew Brees. He may be one of these guys who is a great backup and not necessarily a starter. Or if he is a starter, he's a game manager. That's always
the knock on quarterbacks coming out of Alabama anyway.
Yeah. I mean,
I remember what was his name?
AJ McCarron?
McCarron, yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody loved him, but about all he equated to at the professional level was a backup.
Yeah,
because
so-
he was that game manager. He wasn't
right.
Go ahead.
And I was going to say, if I had to guess who would be my surprise quarterback that the Saints would take in the first round, you know, I would say Zach Wilson from BYU. That would be the guy I could see the Saints make a move to go get if he starts sliding down the draft. And again, you know, the Colts want a quarterback. They need a quarterback. The Bears need a quarterback. The 49ers want a quarterback. The Patriots need a quarterback. So there's a lot of teams out there that are needing quarterbacks that it's going to be hard for a quarterback to slide down the draft close enough, one of these top guys close enough for the Saints to go up there and go get.
Not without salvaging or trading away your draft for the foreseeable future.
You don't have the ammo, you know.
Yeah, that's what I say.
Yeah.
We don't have the draft stock to be doing all that.
But if you had a guy that you really like that was sliding into, let's say he's starting to get into the lower teens, 17, 18, 19, Saints are picking 28. I can see them leapfrogging some teams to get into that, you know, get ahead of a 49ers team or Bears team to go grab a guy if that's the guy they're targeting, you know. And I throw Zach Wilson's name out there because he's kind of seen as a top 10 pick, but on the fringe of that top 10. I mean, Justin Fields, Ohio State, and Trevor Lawrence are clearly the top two, and they'll probably go 1-2. So that where he falls, where Zach Wilson starts to slide, if he is the third quarterback, where he starts to slide, that's where you have to see if the Saints make a move to go get that kind of guy. I
think that the Bears set a very dangerous precedent a few years ago when they did the idiotic moves that they did to get Trubisky. And you're talking about a guy that had 13 starts in college, and you traded to move up one spot, which you didn't have to do to begin with. Plus, you went all in on him, and it just wasn't the guy.
Well, and that's what's dangerous about what the Bears may do, because I could see the Bears going after Jameis Winston too, because of that issue. The Bears, I think Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy are playing for their jobs right now.
Sure,
this year is the make or break year, and. I'm trying to remember who wrote this column. I think it was either Bob or Kyle wrote this column basically saying that if the Saints make an offer to Winston, they're looking at paying him between $8 and $9 million a year, which, you know, with a lot of incentives, if he wins a starting job, if he does certain things, you know, that's where they would go with this. So $8 or $9 million a year, and let's say the Bears come in and offer him $12 million a year, which isn't that much more, but I think that's something the Saints would not be able to match because they just don't have the cap space to do that. And in that scenario, the Bears get a starter. Winston may jump not just for the money, but because he's not going to have to worry about competing with anybody because I think, you know, Trubisky's gone. Foles will be gone, you know. So then what do the Saints do? Now they have to get a quarterback. So we'll see. That's why it's hard to predict the draft right now. It's hard to predict anything until we start seeing how free agency plays out.
I think that ultimately the decision on Winston will come down to Winston. I'm sorry. That'll come down to Winston himself. He's going to have to choose which place that he thinks he can be most successful at. And I think that we have the edge in that because I think that we have a much better roster than the Chicago Bears do.
I do too. I just, you know, I think the money will say something to him as well. I think he wants to stay here too.
I do too.
But I think the money's going to say something to him. Not having to compete with Taysom Hill. Yeah, I'm combining the two now. Not having to compete with Taysom for a starting job because, Saints fans are going to laugh at this, but there's a very real possibility Taysom Hill beats him out for a starting job. That doesn't mean
it all comes back to the thing we've beat on ever since we got Winston. It's that decision-making process. Has a year in this system given him the tools that he needs to make better decisions and make better choices?
Well, yeah, exactly. And, the Saints are committed to Taysom Hill. They are.
Yeah.
Where he fits in, I don't know right now. But, Calvin, no, you're not late, Calvin. It's we had to start an hour early, so you're not late at all.
We knew we was going to run long, so we just
we
started early.
Anna, I'll talk about that in a second. She wants to know why we're always broke and Tampa Bay can go out and basically stack their roster.
Because we have stars that we're doing right by, I think would be one way to answer that. I mean, we gave the deal to Kamara. We gave the deal to Thomas. Mm-hmm. And there's more coming that we're going to have to make some really tough decisions on. I mean, we ponied up the money to keep a DeMario Davis. And all of these decisions, were they not made the way that they were, this team would not have been as competitive as it was the last year or 2 years, in my opinion.
It was, and they've got a lot of, Devin White's under a rookie contract. Most of that secondary's under a rookie contract. They drafted a tackle in the first round. They got high draft picks because they've been finishing so badly. They just hit on a lot of draft picks. They were able to get guys fairly cheaply this year. Low cap figures, more money pushed to the back end, and they'll let them go because they're avoidable years. That kind of stuff. But they were a good team. They were just really a quarterback and a kicker away from getting back to the playoffs, and they ended up winning the Super Bowl because they fixed both those positions, which goes to what John was talking about earlier, not being a Jameis Winston fan. You see, you got rid of Winston, you brought in Tom Brady, you go to the Super Bowl after not going to the playoffs since 2007. And now we're talking about trying to win a Super Bowl with the quarterback
that you don't
got rid of. Yeah. So, I was going to ask you, John, right before we got into that part of it, and I just lost my train of thought.
Well, while you're thinking of that, a couple things on Winston. I would say our advantages would be, aside from the things that you mentioned, the weather here versus Chicago would certainly be an advantage. The culture. I know that a lot of guys, when they come to the Saints, they fall in love with the culture and the way they interact in the locker room and everything like that. So I think that's another thing that would point toward us. And then finally, his ability to play Tampa twice a year and have the opportunity to beat the team that gave up on him, I think also plays into a little bit. But again, if somebody like Chicago or somebody else throws, if we're offering 8 and they throw 12, 13 at him per year guaranteed, that's hard to walk away from.
Well, I think if it's no more of a difference than that, he would probably stay put. Now, if you start talking the 15 to 16 area, that may get his head turned.
Well, actually, John, you answered the question I was going to ask you, because that's where I was going with this when I was leading you to this that statement. What would be the appealing things about going to Chicago versus what do you think the appealing things were about staying in New Orleans? And I totally agree with that. And Sean, you're right. It would have to be a little bit more than $12 million a year, probably, like you said, close to 15 to 17 million a year. I think Winston has learned to like this culture, appreciate this culture that he has in that locker room. That's a very tight locker room. Bob was right. There are going to be some changes. Maybe some longtime veterans don't come back. And I'm talking about players like, like Thomas Morstead may not come back. Sheldon Rankins may not come back because he's going to be a free agent. I can't see them spending much money on him because actually Onyemata's kind of beat him out of a starting job.
Hendrickson as well.
Hendrickson, I cannot see them paying Hendrickson.
I think he's going to be gone too.
I think.
Well, see, last year before the season started, I figured that he was going to be a casualty of the 53 cut.
Yeah, and I can see that thinking, especially because we were trying to make a move, which thank God the league stopped us. But he was trying to make a move to sign Jadeveon Clowney, and we ended up getting the better end of the deal. Clowney did absolutely nothing, spent the time on injured reserve, and we got a guy who came in second or third in the league in sacks. But I think the Saints know what kind of player they have with Hendrickson. I think he is a pass rush specialist, not a 3-down defensive end.
Yeah.
He doesn't play the run very well, and he really is just a pass rusher. So, yeah, I just can't – I can see some team paying him a lot of money to be a 3-down player, and he's just not going to be that.
Right, yeah. I could say you brought up pass rushers. This is totally unrelated to anything you're saying, but I got a direct message from Junior Gillette today, and he sent me a highlight video. I'm like, what? Okay, good job. I didn't even know how to respond to it. I was like, out of nowhere, he just sends me a highlight video of himself. I was like, okay, good, that's great.
Junior Gillette, I think he's got me blocked because I brought up the belt incident, or I brought up the fight. No, I brought up the fight in the locker room with what was that guy's name? He was a backup defensive end, defensive tackle, Dreadlock. Something, I don't know what his name was anymore, but it was just an undrafted free agent, and they got in a fist fight in the locker room, and either he as someone else's name, like a burner account on Twitter, or one of his entourage came out there and told me I didn't know what the hell I was talking about. So stupidly, I go and post a link to the story about it, where I think it was Catherine Terrell broke down all the things that went wrong in 2014, 2015, and step by step, and she posted, all these things, and that reporter's lying. Oh, okay. All right, here we go. Yeah. So, you're going to believe some white girl versus me. Well, if you go into that tack, then I'm not. I thought you were a sleaze bucket before, but if you go that tack, that's
when you punch out. You just walk away. Yeah.
Right. So,
are we talking about Gillette?
Yes, it's funny that you brought up Gillette like that, because I don't know what that dude's problem is. He and Akeem Hicks. Akeem Hicks is different though. But they both have this grudge against the Saints, but Gillette goes from this love-hate relationship.
Yeah, he was asking for a job at the beginning of the season last year.
Exactly.
Yeah, he goes back and forth, yeah.
Yeah, and then he gets pissed off, and he, I'm pulling for everybody who could beat the Saints because you ain't got nobody can do what I can do, and all this. Oh man, come on, He
was great when he was here. He brought a lot of things to the table. He had that motor, but when he had a nervous breakdown, that just kind of ruined all the positive things that he was doing.
Right.
I think he really is bipolar. I mean, I'm not a psychologist, and I can't diagnose somebody based on tweets, but for him to go this back and forth, swinging back and forth on that, that's what it seems like to me. But that's just me reading tweets and nothing else.
Well, when it walks like a duck, talks like a duck, and quacks like a duck, what else are you going to call it?
Yeah,
He's an idiot.
That's why my brother posted him. Hacksaw Butch Reed passed away. I did not.
No.
Yeah, I did not know this. My brother posted a picture of him. I'm like, okay, it's Hacksaw Butch Reed. So
Hacksaw Butch Reed was a professional wrestler that probably worked in back before it was just the WWE. There were what they called territories: Mid-South, Memphis, WCCW in over in Dallas with Devon Eriks. Hacksaw Butch Reed was I want to say he played for the Chiefs, maybe, but he was a former professional football player, and he worked in probably every territory that ever existed, and all the way up to when WCW during the Monday Night Wars, when that was all going on. He even worked there, and he was an excellent worker. He always worked as a heel.
Yeah, he died on the 5th. Yeah, so he just passed away. Let's see, where did he play football? He played. Yeah, he's a rookie free agent with the Kansas City Chiefs, and was a linebacker that was cut before the season.
Yeah,
so that would be 78, 77. Yeah, because
he was 76. He was a fantastic worker. He worked, as a matter of fact, he worked with the guy that would go on in WWE to be Farouk. He was a former All-American linebacker, I want to say, at Florida State, Ron Simmons.
Yep. I remember that. That's still when I was watching that crap on TV.
Yeah. He was always the bad guy, and he played it so incredibly well.
Well, I remember when he and Hacksaw Jim Duggan had to fight over who had the right to be called Hacksaw. And I said, the other thing missing was Jack Reynolds coming in, the football player, Hacksaw Jim Reynolds, coming there and, be the third guy. Who's the real Hacksaw? So John's like looking at us like, I don't know what the hell y'all talking about.
I was gonna say, I thought it was Hacksaw Jim Duggan, not Hacksaw whoever.
Hacksaw Jim Duggan was a different guy.
He was the most famous one.
He was the one. Of course, that's a lot of that is due to the fact that while he started out or while he worked extensively in the Mid-South during that time, he timed it just right, I guess you could say, by going to the WWE and got a major push there. So he just kind of blew up his career by going to the big leagues, as they call it, in WWE at the time that he did.
Yes, he was carrying over just when Vince McMahon took over almost all the wrestling syndicates and pulled them all together to make the WWF, and then it became the WWE eventually.
Yeah.
But, that was in the early 80s, and that's kind of when I stopped really watching it, because when I watched it, it was just, 3 rows of folding chairs. There's always some little old lady sitting in the very front row you always saw, and you got to watch. It's an hour-long show, and you go and watch these stupid idiots you never heard of wrestle for about 20 minutes with some pointless match where all they do is they bounce back and forth on the ropes and swing each other around. They're not very good yet. That's why they're on.
But at the same time, those no-name guys that would work the beginning of those syndicated shows, that's where you came up with HBK, Shawn Michaels. He started in Mid-South. His very first match was at the Irish McNeil Boys Club in Shreveport for Bill Watts in Mid-South.
I know. But yeah, these guys would the way the wrestling format worked, you saw a good match in the beginning, then you had this long, pointless match, but with these guys were, cutting their teeth, learning how to do the things. And then at the end, you get the big match you've been waiting for,
main event.
It'd be Dusty Rhodes against the Iron Sheik, or it would be Hacksaw Jim Duggan versus Hacksaw Butch Reed, a battle over who gets to have the name, or the masked wrestler, or whoever the villains. They always had a villain versus somebody, and people want to people. That's the match you wanted to see.
But
So
you had to sit there through the entire show to
Right.
get to the main event.
and
It's the same concept when you go to a live show.
Mhm.
Only now there's such a promotional push made, and such a the product that you do with the WWE Raw, the Friday Night SmackDown, all these shows, you have such a network that when you get to some as they call them now, pay-per-views at the end of the month, you're familiar with each one of the somebody in each match, and you're more willing to pony up that amount to buy that pay-per-view. That's what it's all about.
Right. So, but the thing about these shows in the beginning, when you got to the main event, you're looking at the clock and you're like going, okay, oh, good, Bob's back. But you look at the clock and it's like watching, Lassie. Hey, man, 10 minutes left in the show. Timmy's still in the well. We're just getting this.
How did I walk into?
It's just gotta wrap up. And you're watching these wrestling shows. We're talking about wrestling now, Bob. That's what happens when you're gone. But you're like going, come on, man. Let's get to it. And of course, it's getting real good. Here come the credits. They start rolling up, and we'll talk about this next week. You're like, I just sat through this whole damn thing. You chose two clowns throwing each other in the ropes for 20 minutes when this is what I wanted to see. So that's
We'll keep the cameras rolling, and we'll update you next week on Mid-South Wrestling.
Yep. And that's it. And Anna saying, I went to one show in St. Bernard. That's exactly where they used to hold these things. The oxymoron name, the St. Bernard Cultural Civic Center. Where, if you've been to St. Bernard, there is no culture. And it's not. Actually, there is culture. There's culture.
The weekend of WrestleMania 30. That was my sister's reward to me for finishing my chemo treatments. She took me to WrestleMania 30 because it was in New Orleans, and the WrestleMania event was held on a Sunday night. The Friday preceding that, they had a day-long event there called the Mid-South Legends Reunion. It was in Chalmette. It was, and they had a panel of some of the old Mid-South guys like the Rock and Roll Express, Jim Cornette, the Midnight Express, Kamala was there, Hacksaw Duggan was there.
The vice president was there?
Huh?
The vice president was there? Wow. Oh, no, not that Kamala. I'm sorry.
Yeah, this is different Kamala.
I know.
But they asked these
about.
one by one, these guys on this panel were talking about remembering back in the Mid-South days when they would come to places like Chalmette and St. Bernard Parish and all these house shows that you'd be wrestling in front of maybe 200 or 300 people. It wasn't the same then as it is now when you wrestle in front of 75 to 90,000 people once a month.
And Chad mentions the Junkyard Dog, and that was really one of the first ones that really marketed himself with the theme music, and he had props, he had the dog chain around him and that kind of stuff. That's where it went to. And actually, it's highest of football. Big Ernie Ladd, who played for the San Diego Chargers back in the 60s and the old AFL days. A lot of former football players would go into wrestling. So you would see these guys, Paul Orndorff, he was once a Saints draft pick, and he got cut in camp and he became a professional wrestler. Big Ernie Ladd, Wahoo McDaniel was a wrestler, and he was a member of the Miami Dolphins. That was
New York Jets.
Oh, New York Jets. Well, he was also a member of the Dolphins too.
Yeah, Broncos
But,
too.
But I'm sorry, Bob. What was that?
Broncos too.
Broncos as well. Yeah. So that before the NFL, just like wrestling, the NFL was starting small. That's how these guys made money and stayed in shape. They would become professional wrestlers. And I think every kid, or just about every kid, especially in the South, they would kind of start watching wrestling because that would come on Saturday afternoons on TV. So, you end up watching this stuff, and it's a comic book. Really, there's good guys and bad guys, and they're beating each other up, and it looks real enough. I mean, you don't pay attention to the fact they got a steel plate underneath the ring, and they're stomping every time they hit somebody, but you hear that hit of the metal plate when they stomp on it. So it sounds like you're really tagging somebody, and they fall backwards and all this stuff. So to a kid who thinks his stuff is real is like, oh yeah, this is great, and then
see, back in those days, the days of the territories, it was still what they call kayfabe. It was still quote unquote real. There wasn't the age of the internet where you found these guys doing a house show in upstate New York, and you find out 2 minutes after the match is over how it went.
Mm-hmm.
It was against the rules back then for the good guys and the bad guys to ride in the same car. It was put over as a real thing then, whereas now it's well, as the name states, it's entertainment. I went the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase, who was also a product of that era. He went to the WWE, just as we were talking about Hacksaw a while ago, and he's now an evangelist. And I went to see him, and one of the first things that he said when he walked up on stage, he said, "Is wrestling real?" He said, "Nope." He said, "It's a soap opera for men."
Yeah. Well, you look at a guy like, and I mentioned the guy, Dusty Rhodes. He used to cut his forehead before shows. So, he had all this scar tissue on the front of his head because his big thing was when somebody hit him, he wanted the blood to come out. So he had this blood running down his face. So people thought, he was really getting hurt. And it's a scripted fight where, a guy's getting the crap kicked out of him for a little while. Then all of a sudden, something happens. The guy makes a mistake, and he pops up like, Popeye who just ate a can of spinach. And he's, all it's missing is the music, and he just goes crazy and beating everybody. And that's what the fans really enjoyed. So, yeah, my brother who is a diehard wrestling fan is correcting me every time I mention
it was called blading. It was also called gigging.
Yeah.
And what a lot of them would do would, you see them all with their wrists taped and what have you. Some of them, even I've found out recently, a lot of them would keep the blade in their mouth. It's just a piece of a razor blade that's wrapped in athletic tape. And you see them get thrown out the ring into the floor, and they're laying there like that. And you come up and, oh, he's busted open. That's how that works.
Yeah. And you mentioned the Von Erichs before, and I promise you can get back to football in a second. But you mentioned the Von Erichs before.
This is why we chose a 2-hour format tonight.
Right. Well, the Von Erichs, I remember one of them died trying to do a stunt where he basically was trying to jump out of like the rafters on.
No. That was not the Von Erichs. That was the Hart. Owen Hart.
Owen Hart. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And
Von Erichs were over in Dallas, and they ran that territory, and it was completely. The dad was the owner, and it was completely built around his sons. One of them died in Japan.
Yeah.
Under mysterious circumstances. I think 2, maybe 3 of them committed suicide after that. Probably the most known of them would be Kerry Von Erich, who eventually went to the WWE as the Texas Tornado. And what a lot of people don't understand or even know, was the entire time he was in the WWE, he had no leg below his knee. He had been in a very bad motorcycle wreck, and he was doing all this stuff on a prosthetic leg.
I do remember that. That's why I thought he was one of the ones that that had gotten hurt trying to do a stunt. But that's right. I do remember that now. So
he was going to be lowered from the rafters, and they still don't really know what happened. But long story short, he fell, I think, 50 feet.
Mhm.
And depending on who you trust and who you listen to, when he came down, he hit the ring post, and it killed him.
Yeah. So, it's live, but it's also scripted.
Yes.
So, it's purely entertainment. So it's funny we bring up all this stuff, and that's what people are now starting to compare pro football to, especially when they start seeing this stuff with Tom Brady, that, it's like wrestling now. It's what we said 2 weeks ago. When Brady when the Packers get that flag thrown at them on third down, on 3rd and 2, and you're going to call pass interference on that play when you didn't call pass interference in the previous plays, people are like, okay, this is scripted, so this happens this way, so Brady.
I'll say this about the Super Bowl. It left a really bad taste in my mouth in that first half, because you had pass interference called on a play where the receiver tripped over his own feet. The other guy didn't even touch him. They call pass interference. They line up to kick a field goal, call somebody offsides to extend that drive. And I do know for a fact, I watched this with my very two beady little eyes. With 10 seconds left on the clock in the first half, go back and watch it. The Buccaneers had stopped the clock. When they started the play, which was an incomplete pass, the clock didn't even run. I saw that. Tom Brady wants to talk shit and get in the face of Tyrann Mathieu, and they called the penalty on Tyrann Mathieu. It was, as I said, and talking to you, it was blatant, and it turned my stomach.
Well, and it is why I ended up turning it off, because I've been feeling this way since 2018 with the no call, where a guy is saying, the official saying, well, I didn't get a good look at it. What the hell, what were you doing then? That is the.
It's not like that's the only job that you have or anything.
Well, right. And it's just, that it was so blatantly obvious that it was pass interference on that play that, I felt like, no, this is designed to help promote the big market of Los Angeles. They just
new stadium.
Yeah, we got a new stadium. The Chargers aren't getting anybody to come to their games. We want the Rams to succeed there. The Rams cannot fail there again and have to move, because they won't have any teams in Los Angeles. And the thing about LA is not a sports town, it's an entertainment town. So people go there to be seen. People go to the Lakers games are there to be seen at the Lakers game, not because they can name half the players on that team. So yeah, it's just you. And
you watch whenever either of those teams hit a spot where they're mediocre, they'll be playing to half-filled houses.
Yeah, absolutely. So
as long as they're successful, people are going to come out and watch them play and be there to, as you said, to be seen. But you let them approach mediocrity, ain't nobody going to that, except for maybe Jack Nicholson.
Well, the thing about the Rams in this case is they can't let them become mediocre. So I think that's why you have these things going on. Like I don't understand how you can trade salary cap, dead cap money, or a contract to another team. I don't. I mean, it happened. It's happened twice. the Houston Texans were able to trade to the Cleveland Browns, I believe. What was that quarterback's name?
Osweiler.
Who was it?
Brock Osweiler.
Brock Osweiler. That's who it was. Brock Osweiler. They traded him and his cap hit to the Browns because the Browns had a lot of cap space. So it's they allow this, but at the same time, you just feel like, really, is that how this is supposed to work? You should have to eat your dead cap if you made a bad trade, a bad signing, even if you trade and get rid of the guy. So
I would like to point out, I'm not in any shape, form, or fashion, no, regardless of what it may look or sound like. I am not one of these people with the tinfoil hats on that's a conspiracy theorist about how the entire football season is scripted and planned out. But there are some things that defy description. The no call. It's just, and I think that when the season started, there was a narrative. They wanted, as Alan calls it, the State Farm Bowl. They wanted Mahomes and Rodgers, and they fed that and pushed that and pushed that. And then when nobody was talking about Brady except for their diehard fans, were talking about the Buccaneers and Brady getting to the Super Bowl. And then at the halfway point of the season, they started putting it together and they started playing better and they started winning. Then you started to hear the little whispers about how it'll be the passing of the torch game. And
I honestly thought it was going to be that kind of game, but I should have known better. So, John, and this leads into, believe it or not, a legitimate question. Aaron Rodgers won the MVP trophy for the third time. Okay. Drew Brees has never won the MVP, and I think he should have gotten it in 2011. I think he should have at least split it in 2006. And probably he deserved it maybe 2016, but there's been a couple other times where he probably deserved a shot at it for hitting 5,000 yards passing. But the rules constantly change. You know, in some years it's, your team, like in 2011, the Packers went 15-1. So, that's why Rodgers got it. Or when Brees does really well and has, like, I think it was 2017, had only 7 interceptions, the lowest percentage of interceptions in the league, and the highest completion percentage. Oh, well, it's really about yardage and, how much yardage.
It's a slide rule.
Yeah. So what do you think, I guess, if you could pick out a season, which seasons do you think Drew Brees should have gotten the MVP trophy heads or shoulders above anybody else?
To me, 2011 is the one that kind of stands out the most. I definitely agree with you. But again, like what you mentioned, there's always somebody else where that's doing something a little different. Whether Brees isn't mobile or Brees Cam Newton ran in for 11 touchdowns on top of everything else, or Brees has a lot of weapons, so this other guy has nothing and he carried a team. Like, there's always a reason to look in another direction, and I think part of it is the smaller market team, but then part of it is just like you said. It's just they just reinvent what MVP means. If you look back at Brees' career, I just can't fathom how there was no MVP anywhere along the way, considering how many records he's got and how many accolades and everything. So, I mean, that kind of just,
and I get 2006. LaDaine Tomlinson set the NFL rushing record. I think he had, an unbelievable amount of touchdowns and that sort of stuff. But to me, and they went 14-2. But to me, to go from 3-13 the year before to 10-6 and the second seed and getting to the NFC Championship game.
Right.
How that doesn't qualify for you to be league MVP, because you turn this team around. You've got them within a game of the Super Bowl. That one blows me away. It still does to this day, because they'd done that before. They'd split it between, I think, Brett Favre and Barry Sanders one year. They split the MVP. I couldn't understand why they couldn't have done that in this case, and it blows my mind that happened. So,
right. Yeah. 2006, there were so many changes. I don't know if, maybe that's one of the reasons why. It's just like there's so many differences from that team. You can't say that Breeze was the reason, but maybe people looked at it and said Breeze might not be the only reason why the team went from A to B, because with the coaches
and you can't say that
the draft picks and the.
I'm sorry. You can't say that you didn't notice because you gave Sean Payton the Coach of the Year. So
yeah. True.
Yeah. Okay, so Bob, let me ask you. I have two questions for you. One about what year you think Drew Brees should have at least won one MVP, but the second one, right before you went off the air, you said that you could see the Saints trading up for a quarterback. Do you have a quarterback in mind that you think could be a draft pick they would look at?
Which one do you want me to tackle first?
Whichever one's easiest to give an answer for.
Okay. I'll agree with you, John. I think 2011, hands down, Drew Brees was the league MVP. Hands down. I mean, the man broke a 27-year-old NFL record that a lot of people thought was untouchable. Mm-hmm. And he blows it away. He didn't just squeak by it. Rodgers defenders, God help you, because I can't. Rodgers defenders have come at me with, Aaron Rodgers threw less interceptions, like you mentioned, Alan. Yeah, like 5 less.
Right.
Brees still threw more touchdown passes, had a higher completion percentage. And, by the way, you want to die on the hill that Green Bay went 15-1. Well, New Orleans went 13-3. That's not half bad. And again, I keep coming back to a 27-year-old NFL record.
Right.
And my personal hatred for Aaron Rodgers comes out quickly. I admit that. The second most overrated player in NFL history behind Phillip Rivers. It's beyond ridiculous why Brees didn't get it that year. 2006, you can make a case for Brees getting it. 2017, you can make a case for Brees getting it. 2016, like you mentioned. But you could see a legitimate case for someone other than Drew getting it. You cannot make a logical, sane explanation why Drew Brees did not get the MVP in 2011. 27-year-old NFL record.
I'm totally with you. And 2011 team is still my all-time favorite Saints team. Granted, the 2009 team won the Super Bowl. The 2011 team did not make it to the Super Bowl. But as far as just watching that team, when it got on a roll, it was special. I mean, it could be 3rd and 17. And they're picking up that first down on a screen pass to Pierre Thomas. He's going to get the yardage. So it was such a fun team. And to watch that 49ers divisional game, I promise I'm not going to relive the whole thing, but to just that really, you turned the ball over 5 times, but you took the lead twice in the final 4 minutes of the game. Just showed you how explosive that team was, that you could do that. And, I really hope to get you guys on again when Drew does retire, because I'd like for each of you to talk about what Drew Brees meant to you. And for me, that what he did in 2011 is kind of what he means to me, because it was the first time as a Saints fan, and I'm talking about in 2006 and probably that Pittsburgh game, it was the first time as a Saints fan that I felt like we had an opportunity to win every game, no matter what was going on. If we got the ball last, we could probably win this, where you never felt that way before, So that was the thing for me. And you're right, the 2011 team, I mean, that there's no excuse for him not to at least split it with Rodgers. To say that Rodgers was clearly the MVP candidate over Drew Brees is ridiculous. It's absurd.
As a Saints fan, that 2006 season, as great as it was, there was having been a Saints fan for so long, there was always that thing in the back of your mind, like, when is this ride going to end? Yeah. We know that it's not going to be a fairy tale ending, but when is it going to end? And
Calvin shares. He says, Rodgers has Rivers beating the overrated department. The thing about the thing about Phillip Rivers always pissed me off was his whining.
Yep.
And that attitude he had on the sideline. He's always screaming at people.
Well, that's the reason that I despise Peyton Manning and Tom Brady.
Yep.
They get on the sidelines and they just screaming and ripping these guys that they're supposed to be leading.
And Drew Brees, when he goes to the sideline, he starts flipping through now he's at the tablet. But we could be up by 21. There's 2 minutes left. There's Brees with the cap on, flipping through the stuff, looking at the defense for the next time he goes out there. I mean, that I loved that stuff too. So, okay, Bob, now your prediction or your idea, maybe if the Saints go for a quarterback in the first round, who would it be?
I've got my eye on two. It would have been three, but I think Kyle Trask of Florida is kind of dropping into second, third round. And by the way, keep an eye on a kid I really love is KJ Costello, who I think is going to be available maybe even late on day 2. But if I'm right, and just call this a gut feeling, folks, if I'm right and the Saints make a deal to move up in the first round, it'll be for a quarterback, number one. And a guy that's on many people's lips right now is Mac Jones from Alabama. Mac, I really like the way he goes through his progressions. I know he's just a one-year starter, but he has some nice tools.
Calvin's going after you already. Anybody but Mac Jones.
Which is kind of ironic since he is a roll tighter.
Yeah.
Is he?
Yeah.
The thing about flip on the Alabama film of a couple games this year, and I realized that the Tide was far more talented than the majority of their opponents. But just focus on Mac Jones. You have to love his footwork. I like his release, although he holds the ball a little bit too low for me. Those kind of little things can be cleaned up easily. And another guy I think Sean Payton really likes is Trey Lance from North Dakota State. Again, it's a massive jump up in competition from North Dakota State to the NFL. Trey is probably going to go somewhere between, I've seen projections anywhere from the 6th overall pick to 10 or 12. I don't know if the Saints have enough ammunition to move up into the top 8. But if a guy like Trey Lance starts to slip, or it looks like Mac Jones is going to go somewhere between 12 and 15, I think that's where Sean Payton will pull the trigger. I'm also hearing that they really like Jamie Newman, the Wake Forest transfer kid. He transferred to Georgia and then opted out for the season. Strike one for me in my book, by the way. But Jamie Newman is another dual threat guy that they interviewed very extensively at the Senior Bowl. I don't think Newman will go in the first round. But that's an eye to keep on for round 2 or 3. But if the Saints make a move to go up in the first, like you asked about, it's going to be, I think, for Mac Jones or even for Trey Lance. And guys, this is the year for Sean Payton to do that kind of trade, because you don't have any glaring needs on that roster, assuming that they're able to make this salary cap puzzle fit. You still have a roster very much championship contention. With excellent depth and youth, which is lost on a lot of people. You're going to have some contracts that you're not going to be able to honor in the upcoming seasons. But for 2021, I think all 4 of us agree that this team is going to have a competitive product, depending on who lines up behind center. So you can re-sign a guy like a Jameis Winston, or even, God forbid I say this, even bite the bullet and have Taysom Hill as a one-year starter if you can bring back Winston on a reasonable deal. But you can bring back a guy like Winston or trade for a guy like Teddy Bridgewater for 2 years, 3 years, while you groom a quarterback. And if you re-sign Winston and he flames out like you think he's going to do, Alan, and I don't necessarily disagree with that, but I've seen, you and you too, John. I've seen some of your apprehensions and I get them. But you can bring back a guy like Winston on a 3-year deal with a team opt-out on that 3rd year. So that way, if the guy does crap the bed, you are grooming your next quarterback. And frankly, I think Sean Payton has waited for this day for 4 or 5 years. Not that he wants to rush Drew Brees out the door, because their relationship is, there's no better quarterback coach relationship in the history of the league. But I think Sean is foaming at the mouth to get and train and groom a new quarterback for his offensive system. How much newer do you get than a rookie?
Yeah.
Right. And the Saints have not drafted a quarterback in the first round since Archie Manning in 1971. That's a well-known fact. I mean, all these years they'd never drafted a quarterback in the first round outside of Manning. And that was the 71 draft. Quarterbacks went Jim Plunkett to New England, first overall pick, Archie Manning to the Saints, and then Dan Pastorini to the old Houston Oilers.
Didn't Theismann come out of that draft too, guys, like later on?
Who, Theismann?
Yeah.
Yes, he did. He was a 4th-round pick by the Miami Dolphins, and he went straight to the CFL because you weren't beating out Bob Greasy. Bob Greasy just took the Bills, the Dolphins to the Super Bowl in 71. In fact, he talks about how he missed out on being on the perfect team in 72 because he was in the CFL. But he came back in 74, got traded to the Redskins. When Sonny Jurgensen retired, he backed up Kilmer and then took over for Kilmer in 78 or 79. So, yeah. But, yeah, I'm curious to see if they do make this move and they do draft a quarterback this year because Peyton's saying all the right things about both Taysom and Winston. He's talking up Winston a lot. So I don't doubt they're going to make an effort to re-sign him. But my fear is the Winston we have seen over in Tampa is the Winston we're going to get here. A guy who is going to have you say, what the was that? Both good and bad, when it comes to him throwing the ball, just because he is a guy to me that is so confident in his arm strength and being able to put that ball wherever he wants. He doesn't give a damn, and not that he doesn't care about winning, but it's going to be like there's the short guy here, or I can take the deep ball and fit it in a tight window and make an incredible throw. Boom, I'm going for it. And it could be a pick or it could be an incredible touchdown, one or the other. And I worry
he's going to throw a touchdown pass. It's just a matter of which team it's for.
Yep.
Now, let me ask you guys a question.
Okay.
With the stuff going on with the COVID and Kamara and all the latest news about that, do you think that that's going to affect our ability to trade up? I mean, are we going to lose significant draft capital because of that or no?
I don't know what's going to happen with all this because there's two things that went on. You're talking about the things with the Saints getting in trouble this past weekend, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Number one, Michael Ornstein showing up at the training facility. But Peyton's got this relationship with Ornstein. And they were testing Ornstein. So even though he was a non-employee, the Saints do pay him for his marketing and his logistical stuff, and they were testing him every time. So they have records of this. So it's not like it was just some guy that were pulling it off the street and say, "Oh yeah, you have free reign of the thing. We don't have to get tested." And the other one's really Alvin Kamara, not wearing a tracking device. So do you punish the team for that, or do you punish the player? And honestly, I could see them suspending Kamara, not taking away a draft pick. if they were to go that route. So
I think probably one of the things that they're looking at is this being the third offense leveled at the Saints. But I mean, if you want to raise hell and punish people, how about the Tennessee Titans?
Yep.
Well, there's a ton of examples. Yeah. I mean,
you had to shut down the Browns facility because of COVID. You had to shut down the Titans facility. You had to reschedule the Ravens all over the place. I mean,
you had to move the 49ers out of the state of California to get through the season.
Yeah, but that was more of a state issue, not the NFL in that regard. But yeah, there was a lot of things going on that I think taking away draft picks, and the Saints are the only ones that had that draft pick taken away for dancing in the locker room without mask, and yet the Steelers go on TikTok and do a dance in the locker room without mask. Nothing happens to them. So it's just the inconsistency of the discipline just drives me insane. It really does, because there are no rules. That's
typical Roger Goodell, though.
There's no rules, so it's really at the whim of the commissioner. He decides on the punishment. And,
well, at least he loves the New Orleans Saints, though.
Yeah. Right. So
that's my worry, is that because this is a multiple offense, allegedly, for New Orleans, that Goodell will be the corrupt Nazi that he is time and time again. And before you know, we're going to see the Saints get zapped, with a third round draft choice or something like that. So that certainly is my worry. And that kind of thing, if that does happen, a worst case scenario like that, that kind of thing would change the scale of, because right now, my part of my feeling on, I think the Saints could and would move up in the draft is because of the draft capital that they have compared to the depth and the talent on the current roster. Well, if the commissioner recognizes that and he starts taking day 2 picks, or God forbid, even a day 1, even a first round draft choice, that changes the complexion of that theory entirely.
Absolutely. So that's why I don't know what's going to happen with Ornstein, but I hope that if they're going to discipline a player or organization, you should discipline Kamara for not wearing the tracking device, not the team. And I don't know. We'll see. I'm afraid of that too, because I do think for salary cap purposes, they need to draft a quarterback. That was always been my bugaboo about paying Winston and paying Taysom Hill, or going after a Watson or a Carson Wentz, or now Russell Wilson. You're taking on a huge contract for a quarterback on a team that has a lot of huge contracts on it already, and is was at one time $100 million over the cap. So I mean, that's a lot of it. So we've got a lot of things up in the air, and I think the next few weeks we're going to see how this all plays out. But I suspect that they will bring back Winston under a cheap deal, but they will draft somebody with the idea that guy is going to be the one that's going to compete against Winston and beat these guys. I agree with you here, Calvin. Calvin's saying they need to draft some receivers too. He said 3. I definitely think they need to, because you don't have Drew Brees anymore to make the bag boy from Rouse's or Piggly Wiggly an all-pro wide receiver. You really need to have some legitimate receivers, and I think that's been part of the problem these last few years, is we haven't had a young, speedy receiver with size to be the number 2 guy opposite Michael Thomas.
That being said, Alan, I do like the maturation, if you want to call it that, the way that your mid-tier guys in that receivers room has stepped up this year, like a Marquez Callaway, like a Traquan Smith seemed to come out a little bit better this year. Deontay
Harris,
thank you. how he transitioned into being a legitimate receiver instead of just a return guy. I do like the step forward that those guys made this year.
The problem for me is, okay, you look at the Tampa game, for example. Harris was tearing that team apart, and he gets hurt.
That killed him.
All the speed was gone.
Yeah.
I think if Harris was healthy that whole game, Tampa's not in the Super Bowl. I really don't think they had any answer for Deontay Harris. So if you had a guy with size and that kind of speed who could do those sort of things that Harris was doing, that just makes the Saints that much more difficult to defend. The receivers have to back the hell off. Thomas having bad ankles, Callaway's ankles were injured, and Traquan Smith is coming off of a bad leg. You saw the Tampa defensive back just pushing around those guys and sitting on top of them all day. Everybody talks about Drew Brees' arm, but the very fact is our receivers couldn't get separation because they were unhealthy. And we have some guys, but I want some guys who can be our starters so we can fall back on those guys to come in and play in a few games. I think it's a lot harder for a Callaway and a Smith and a Harris to count on those guys for 16 plus games. So that's where I think the weakness is. So if we don't take a quarterback in the first round, I want to take a receiver. And as much as I'd love to get the Alabama receiver, we're not getting him. But I would love to have a receiver.
And I agree with you guys. I think receiver is going to be addressed in the draft, not free agency. And you can certainly, we've seen the Saints do it. You could certainly bring in a quality guy without using a first-round draft choice on them. And I think that's what they'll do. Because we mentioned Emmanuel Sanders as a possible cap casualty earlier. Deontay Harris, I think we saw only a glimpse of what Deontay Harris can do in this offense. And now you give him a quarterback that can beat a defense over the top. You're going to see Deontay used much in the same way that the Chiefs use a Tyreek Hill or the 49ers use a Deebo Samuel. Deontay's going to be a threat from all over the formation. But he's not a number one guy. And I realize you have Mike Thomas, and Mike Thomas is your dude, and that is your top receiver as it should be. But you need to have, in this day and age of the NFL, in my opinion, you need to have two number one guys. You need to have a 1 and a 1A.
Yep.
And that's the kind of guy that you're asking them to bring in, Alan. And John, I know you're real high on this kid Tony from Florida, and I love his film. But Tony might even go in the first round. I'm seeing the LSU kid, Terrence. Forgive me. Help me out, LSU fans. What's his last name? Terrence.
Oh, I'm not an LSU fan, so I couldn't tell you.
We don't draft LSU players anyway. So
Very good point.
I go. My school is the ones that are vermilion and white. The University of Louisiana.
Hey.
Marshall. Someone say Marshall.
Yeah. Yes.
Terrence Marshall.
And thank you. And John, you're right. I stopped doing my draft profiles on any LSU guys.
Smart.
But that's just an example. They can get a quality guy in round 2 or 3 that can come in and be a starting caliber wideout. And Alan, you're absolutely right. That's what they need, because Drew Brees wasn't the Drew Brees that we know anymore since really the last part of 2018 and certainly the last 2 years.
Right.
So if you're going to bring in a new quarterback, you better be prepared. I realize that this new guy, whomever it is going to have Michael Thomas, going to have Alvin Kamara, and going to have a couple of dangerous gadgets like Taysom Hill and Deontay Harris, and those are going to be valuable. But you need another bona fide number one wide receiver type of player.
Well, Jared Cook was a good example of what happens when you don't have enough receivers. We bring Jared Cook in to be essentially a big receiver for us with some size and speed, and he fumbles the ball away, and he's not going to be back here next year. His contract, in fact, he's a free agent after this year, or if he's not, No, I think he is a free agent.
No, he's a free agent. Yeah.
Yeah, they're not going to bring him back. You know, so you need a tight end as well. Yes, Trotman looks like a good pick for you, but I don't know if he's really your number one tight end. And you need a receiving tight end like Travis Kelce. So, you know, again, a guy like the Florida tight end, not Trask. I can't believe I just forgot his name. Number 80.
He's a guy too, but I don't remember who.
Yeah. Hang on now. Somebody's going to tell me right now by the time I look it up. But Pitts. There it is. Yeah. Kyle Pitts. It's Kyle Trask and Kyle Pitts. Okay. So, but Pitts over there from Florida is a guy that they could possibly look at in the first round as well. That's going to be a good receiving tight end for you. So you need to have those multiple weapons, like you said, a 1A, 1 and a 1A. You need a vertical guy who can stretch the field, who has size, and you need that tight end that can attack the seam like Jimmy Graham did back in the day. Calvin named one of my favorite Alabama receivers, who I hope flunks all his physicals and he slides to the second or third round. But Waddle, you know, I'd love to get a hold of Waddle, because I think he is that kind of guy. You know, you're not going to get Devontae Smith, but you could get a Waddle, which is pretty close to Smith, you know, and we've seen of all the players that Alabama's put out in the NFL that have been productive, those receivers are damn good. You know, so that's going to be a safe thing.
Somebody commented a while ago about going and trying to get DJ Chark from Jacksonville. You're fixing to bring in a brand new franchise quarterback. They ain't letting go of Chark.
No.
And, you know, Calvin says Pitts is a mixture of Vernon Davis and Jimmy Graham. I'm fine with that. I know there's a lot of guys who don't like the fact that his tight end doesn't want to block and things like that, but that's not really that important in this offense. Trotman can do that. Josh Hill can do that for you. It gives you a receiving option. And I think those are the kind of things that are really the turnovers and having those offensive weapons, I think, are the real difference between this team and the 2009 team that won a Super Bowl. You know, you've got a good defense. You really need an offense, though, that can finish games out.
Sure.
And I think especially in the postseason, that's where you need that. And I think you do need, and this is why I think we also lost to Tampa, you do need a closer, a big back with fresh legs who can, once you build up the lead, your defense has been beating the hell out of somebody, your big back now starts running clock, you know, and that's what you saw with Tampa with Fournette, basically not playing much all season, and in the postseason kind of gets that rolling. So it's all different aspects of things that I think they could do in this draft to really build up this offense.
I think it's kind of going to be a, for lack of a better word to use, it's going to be a transition period for the Saints, because for so long you have been able to say, okay, we've got Drew, he's going to get us there. And now you're not going to have that. It's going to be more of a team thing. You're not going to put that kind of pressure on an Alvin Kamara, because that's just not the state of the game today. You're going to have to.
Oh, go ahead. I was going to say, somebody asked earlier how many draft picks the Saints have. We don't know yet, because my understanding, they have a first, a second, and a fourth, but they get a compensatory 3 for Terry Fontenot going to Atlanta. We're assuming they're going to get a compensatory 3 for losing Bridgewater to Carolina. But I don't think they have their actual third-round pick. Do they, Bob?
I thought they lost a 4th-round pick. In other words, I think it's a possibility they could have 3 third-round picks. But don't quote me on that. You might be right, Alan, about the 2 compensatory for the 3rd and a 4th rounder. Either way, it looks like this team is going to have 3 picks in the 3rd and 4th round combined. along with the first and second.
Right.
We already know that they lost a 6th. They traded that last year for the Tommy Stevens experiment. But they have a 5th also to play around with.
They lost the 5th for Quan Alexander.
You're right.
Yeah, they lost the 5th for the Quan Alexander. Then they lost the 7th round pick for the maskless dancing. So you no day 3 picks, but you have a lot of, which is actually a good thing, because if you look at the 2017 draft, you had 2 firsts, a 2nd, and 3 thirds, and a 6th. So you're picking all at the top half of the draft, which is kind of what you want to do anyway. That's where you want all your extra picks. You really don't want a bunch of extra picks on day 3.
So particularly, I mean, they're chess piece pawns, really, and we've seen Peyton use that. Now all 4 of us can go down the list of, so and so came out of the 5th round, 6th round, 12th round back in the day. We all know that. But your first, second, third, and maybe 4th rounders, those are the guys that you count on to contribute immediately to your football team.
Absolutely. So I think those players were really good to kind of, not only now that you have a new quarterback coming in, you have good young offensive pieces that you can kind of get this team rolling and reshape this offense and maybe be more vertical than you were in the Drew Brees. All right. I saw it in the background. So did Chad in John's background picture. Sam Mills's jersey up there in the frame. Sam did not get in the NFL Hall of Fame this past weekend, which that was probably the most disappointing thing for me, because I really think all 4 belong in the Hall of Fame, but I really would have liked to have seen Sam join Ricky Jackson in the Hall of Fame. Y'all's opinions of Sam Mills, John?
Well, he is he grew up local to me, so I've always kind of had an eye on him since his Long Branch, New Jersey days. If I had to pick one player that was my favorite all-time Saint, that would be the guy. So this is the second time now where he got close. He made that final list, but didn't make it in. Honestly, as the day was progressing, I was like, you know what? As bad as the season ended, and we lost Breeze for the forever, if they can at least get Sam Mills into the Hall of Fame, it'll at least leave a good taste in my mouth. But I was really bummed this time around. I mean, not to knock any of the guys that got in. I mean, there's tons of talent walking in the Hall of Fame, but there's just too many guys that deserve that aren't in there. Not just Saints.
I'm really a stickler right now. I'm when it comes to I'm going to ask you the same question, Bob, in a second. But when it comes to the modern players getting to the Hall of Fame, I'm kind of like, okay, they got in. They got in, but that doesn't excite me anymore. It's the older players. That's the ones I'm watching now. I was happy to see Drew Pearson get in, but I was really hoping Sam would get in, because that's the guys that are waiting for a long time. Clay Matthews is now going to be another one. Not Clay Matthews, who played for the Packers, but his dad, who played for the Browns. Yeah, that's who we're talking about. And he's now going to go into the senior pool, which is a lot harder to get in. So that's who I'm waiting to see. I want Sam Mills in. And Anna, my favorite was Pat Swilling as well.
Absolutely.
But Bob, your opinion of Sam, what do you think of Sam Mills?
Well, listen, folks, like John said, you can make a case for all 4 of those Dome Patrol members getting in. Ricky Jackson is already in. And Sam. First of all, Pat Swilling, I think, should be the next Saint player in the Hall of Fame. He was my favorite by far on those Dome Patrol teams. I think it's a travesty that Pat doesn't even get close. You put his numbers up against any other outside linebacker from the pass rush era, outside of Lawrence Taylor, who was in a category all by himself. And Pat Swilling's numbers are comparable to all of them. better than most of them. And you put Mills. Mills is a close second to Swilling, to a guy that should be in the Hall of Fame. And John, I agree with you. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, so and so didn't deserve to get in, and such didn't deserve to get in. It's just a shame for Sam Mills and Pat Swilling's legacies that they aren't more respected. And I'm afraid that it's reached the point that we'll probably have to wait until they get to a point like Drew Pearson just got in, as a seniors member, because everybody is pushing the narrative of the here and now is the greatest thing ever. That's why Patrick Mahomes is the greatest quarterback that ever lived, by the way, because he's the young guy now. It's a shame for the late Sam Mills and Pat Swilling both. And I know it gets under Pat's skin. I've talked to him personally. I know you have too, John. Yeah. It bothers him a lot that not only him or his other teammates aren't held in higher regard. And those guys were they were monsters, meaning that quite literally on the football field. Every single one of them, and Von Johnson too, the late Von Johnson, he was so underrated throughout his career. Teams literally feared going up against those guys. And that's when this is an era when you were talking about football players, including quarterbacks, were men, and they knew they were going to get hit, and they accepted that, and they relished the challenge, and they still feared these poor guys. That's why they should be in the Hall of Fame.
Absolutely.
On the sidebar, viewers, if you don't follow John Butler and his work, John, I'm envious of you because the bulk of your work is past and historical pieces, in particular our New Orleans Saints. It's an era of football that unfortunately is forgotten by the younger fans. But guys, read John's pieces. I mean, he does such a spectacular job with these former players, interviews, and retrospective pieces.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I want to ask John a question. Where did you come up with the concept of the life of the Saint?
Where did I come up with the concept? All right. Well, when I was working with Last Word on Sports, I would put out a few articles, just like talking about games that had happened or games that were upcoming, just basic stuff. And I reached out to actually Kyle Turley. He was the first guy I ever reached out to, and I said, hey, look, I'd love to talk to you for an article, and within 3 minutes of me sending that message to him, he texted me back his cell phone number. I was like, wait a minute, these guys really are accessible. So yeah, I interviewed him. I interviewed a few guys over there, but the more I did that, the more I realized, as long as there's guys like Bob Rose in the world that are doing the real nuts and bolts reporting and giving the real deal scoop on that kind of stuff, what I put out there is not going to measure up. So let me do something completely different. So that's I just enjoyed that more, and the more I watch like those A Football Life and things like that, the more I gravitate toward those kind of stories and just kind of getting to know the guys a little bit more off the field than what you would typically see in an article or whatever. So,
well, that's what I always compared Life of a Saint to, was a written form of the show that the NFL Network does.
A Football Life.
A Football Life.
Yeah.
You do such an incredible job on it, man.
Thank you. And for the record, A Football Life is like a million times better than 30 for 30. I just like those so much more. The way they're done, it's so good.
A Football Life is it's very fun. And in fact, I'm going to talk about something that I shared this morning when I heard the news about Marty Schottenheimer in a few minutes. But Calvin wanted to know who got into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So I was going to tell him real quick. Peyton Manning, Charles Woodson, Calvin Johnson, Drew Pearson from the seniors, Alan Faneca, John Lynch, and I guess Coors Light must have known this was going to happen because Tom Flores got in, and Tom Flores has a beer can with him on it now, and it did the whole thing. I'm like, okay, he knew. They all knew. They just couldn't say anything because that was way too coincidental. Yeah. And the last person was Bill Nunn. That even I had to go look this guy up to see who he was, and I was a Steelers fan in the 70s. he was a scout for the Steelers in the late 60s, and he was primarily responsible for finding the players from the HBCUs, the historically black colleges, universities. Stallworth, John Stallworth from Alabama A&M. Elsie Greenwood, Mel Blunt. Yeah, Donnie Shell. Yeah, those guys that came from historically black colleges that people didn't really scout very much. If you watch and speaking of a football life and stuff, if you ever watch Caught in the Draft, that series, they pick draft years, and they talk about, how scouting and so forth in the old days was basically kind of like what we do today. They watch college football on TV, and they may go to a few games, but they're going to see the Big Ten. They're going to see the SEC. They're going to go see Notre Dame. They're not going to go see Grambling and Southern play each other in the Bayou Classic. They're not going down to Jackson State or Mississippi Valley State or Florida A&M. North Texas, although that wasn't a historically black college, but not going to those small schools. But the Kansas City Chiefs and the old AFL were one of the first ones to really dive into that. And the AFL, of course, needed those kind of players because they were competing with the NFL for talent. And even in the early 70s, a lot of college, pro football scouting and programs was still going to the big schools. You go get your linebackers from Penn State. You'll get your offensive linemen from Nebraska. They weren't looking at these small schools. So that's why Bill Nunn got in, he was one of the first really big scouts to start bringing that kind of talent in.
The Steelers of the 70s, they started building that dynasty, that legacy in the late 60s and the early 70s. There's a lot of, obviously I'm stuck here in Pittsburgh. A lot of people here don't know that there's a world outside of Western Pennsylvania, but you can get some legitimately good historical pieces on the Steelers. And Chuck Noll, Chuck Noll would defer to Bill Nunn, who would drive to all these smaller schools down south, the black colleges and tiny little schools. And he would turn to Bill Nunn and he goes, hey, draft board is saying, this linebacker from Penn State or this lineman from Southern Cal, who do you got? And Bill would say, well, I really like this kid, John Stallworth, from Alabama A&M, who Nunn almost had Noll convinced to draft Stallworth in the first round over Lynn Swan from USC.
There's a funny story about that, but go ahead with that. I know the story. Some of Noll's other people in ownership, they threatened to quit on him. They like you need a receiver. This kid is going to be available later because nobody knows about him. Because Bill Nunn was doing all the legwork on the guys like Stallworth and this safety. This slow white safety from Kent State named Jack Lambert, and Bill Nunn is very much responsible for the dynasty of the 70s Steelers. Absolutely. You look at the players they drafted. Mean Joe Green from North Texas, Terry Bradshaw from Louisiana Tech, John Stallworth, Alabama A&M. You bring in these guys, and the story I was going to tell you about John Stallworth, which I learned. I think it was part of Caught in the Draft, but I'm not positive. But basically, back then, you share film. Like, okay, I get a canister of film on these players. I'm going to watch it, make my grades. Then my job is to pass that canister of film along to the next team. Okay, and they'd send this film over. And Noll and Nunn was so excited about Stallworth, they're like, we can't send this film out. Somebody's going to see us. They're going to want this guy. So, they said, okay, you got all this film. You got film on these guys. Where's that Stallpepper guy that you got? He said, we're still looking at that film. We haven't gotten to that one yet. We're going to get to it in a minute. And they held on to it until it was really too late for other teams to really look at it. And because it was Alabama A&M and the competition they were playing against, we don't, just push that can along. We don't have time to look at it now. We got to look at Ohio State footage, that kind of stuff. So, it was amazing. And of course, by the late 70s, the league had pretty much caught on to the fact that, these small colleges, and I saw Calvin put GSU up there. But yeah, these small colleges, black colleges, were cranking out some incredible talent. Walter Payton, of course, at Jackson State, Bethea, who went to the Houston Oilers, and there was one other one. There was three of them. I can't remember. That's also caught in the draft when you talk about those colleges. They were like top players in that draft class for that year. By that time, people were like, oh man, we got to watch Grambling and Southern now. We got to start watching these schools because it's a lot of talent coming through there. So yeah, it's a great series. But what I wanted to talk about was the passing of Marty Schottenheimer. They announced back in 2014 that he had developed Alzheimer's. And about a week ago, I think it was, they announced they moved him to hospice. And of course, this morning they announced that he had passed away. Drew Brees wrote a nice thing about him because Drew actually played for Marty in San Diego. And you're a Broncos fan, so I know you got some Marty stuff, Bob. But I've always looked at Marty Schottenheimer as, if I have a struggling franchise, this is the coach I want to take over and coach my team to not only respectability, but to dominance. I may not win a championship, but my goal is to have a great team. So I've always respected Marty Schottenheimer because of that. He taught those guys, and he turned around three franchises, all three of them that he took over. So, Bob, I wanted you to get your opinions and your impressions of Marty Schottenheimer.
First of all, respects to the entire Schottenheimer family. But Alan, you did point out some great things about Marty. And his first job was in Cleveland, where he turned around and also ran Browns franchise, an aging roster, and completely overhauled it into a team that lost to the Denver Elways in 3 out of 4 years. 2 of those times in the final seconds, and really, I'll stop short of calling it miracles, but it was darn close.
Yeah.
And after that, the Browns made one of the biggest mistakes of a mistake-prone franchise, and kind of kicked Marty to the curb, where he landed in Kansas City and turned around a defunct Chiefs organization. Did the same thing to them. And when he left Kansas City because of those playoff failures, did the same thing to San Diego. And all 3 teams, he completely overhauled the roster, made it over in his own personality and what he wanted, out of the franchise. And every single year, whether it was Schottenheimer's Browns, Chiefs, or Chargers, they were not only making the playoffs, they were going in with 12-4, 13-3, 14-2 record as top seeds. Now let's leave the playoff failures aside. I've seen a lot of comparisons to Marty's postseason career. He was the AFC's Jim Mora, and there's a lot of accuracy to that. Someone should have stole Marty's headset in those playoff games, and I think that would have made a difference. But what that man did in franchise building, it was very similar. I know the comparisons to Mora are pretty accurate postseason wise, but he was very similar to what Bill Parcells is able to do in building a franchise. And you're right. If I was starting a team from the ground up, my call back in the day in the 80s and 90s and even early 2000s, it would have been to Marty Schottenheimer. Because he built a team. He built a team that would out physical you on both sides of the ball. And if you were coming to play a Marty Schottenheimer team, you're going to be in store for a physical battle. Marty's teams in the regular season, Marty's teams simply did not beat themselves. So you had to not only physically beat them, you had to mentally beat them too. And I don't think that there's any greater compliment that you could pay to a coach than he was a winner.
Yes. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
John, do you have any thoughts on Marty Schottenheimer?
I mean, look, I'm right along with you guys. It's just whenever you saw him on the sideline, it didn't matter what logo was on the front of his shirt. You knew that he was going to put a winning team out there. He was kind of like the Buck Showalter of football. I mean, like, just take a team from nothing, turn it into something that was really good, but just couldn't finish the deal a lot of times. But yeah, I mean, you knew year after year when you were playing against his teams that you were playing, you had your hands full. So yeah, I had nothing but respect for the guy. So
one of my favorite phrases, there's two of them, but one of my biggest one is his motto of one play at a time. That's probably it's the most obvious, but also the hardest thing for a player to understand when they play in the game, to approach a game one play at a time. Don't let what just happened hang over to the next play, and don't think about the next play until you've done the current play. Take the game one play at a time and see what happens at the end. And you should win. And the other one, of course, is there's a gleam. He talks about getting a gleam. And he explains what that is. And he's talking about what the Super Bowl, the Lombardi Trophy, has a shine to it. But there's a gleam to that trophy that lights up your eyes, and that's the gleam he wants to see in his players. So, I love the guy. I really, really do. I loved his teams. I loved Marty Ball. I loved the way he played. It's just for those reasons. All the stuff we've been talking about: physical, disciplined, don't beat themselves. It's just unfortunate that all three of those things seem to vanish in the playoffs. They made mistakes. They beat themselves, and I watched both the drive and the fumble live as it was happening, and I just couldn't believe what I was seeing, especially the fumble. The drive, I could. It was just one of those things where I've seen that before, not just our Marty team, but another team. But oh man, to see Ernest Biner fumble that ball just like a yard away from getting in the end zone, and they come back. They had worked so hard to come back, and he fumbled like that, and he ended up winning the Super Bowl with the Redskins in 1991.
Yeah,
but in Cleveland, he's known as the fumble. And it's really a shame for Ernest Biner. Sean,
I think Marty Schottenheimer was probably one of the most underrated and underappreciated coaches ever in the National Football League. And unfortunately, you hear references to him now, and it's by and large his shortcomings in the postseason. Yeah. And as all you guys have alluded to, it's really a travesty that all the things that he did, all the teams that he built, all the guys that he coached are never appreciated in the way and in the light that they should be.
Absolutely. Well, okay, guys, we've had you for over 2 hours, so I really appreciate you guys sticking with us on this. Anna says she remembers him mostly from Kansas City. That was probably his longest stint was in Kansas City. I think he was with the Browns from 84 to 88. 89, he got let go, so 4 years. But Kansas City, he was there from 89 to 97, so that was his longest stint. So
he coached Montana in Kansas City, did he not?
Yep.
For 2 years.
Yep. Yeah.
And Marcus Allen.
Yeah,
Yes.
Marcus Allen. And it's really a shame that Montana got knocked out with that concussion, because they probably go to the Super Bowl that year.
Mm-hmm.
Because he got knocked out. Was it against Buffalo? I think it was Buffalo.
It was, yeah.
Yeah. I think they upset Buffalo. Now, whether or not they beat Dallas or they may have been playing the Redskins that year, I don't remember what year that was.
93 AFC Championship game. So
it would have been Dallas.
It would have been Dallas.
Yeah. He would have. They would have gotten the Super Bowl and upset. They would have upset the Bills. I'm sure they would have with Montana. I don't know if they would have beaten Dallas, but I know they would have beaten Buffalo if Montana finishes that game. But anyway, thank you guys for sticking with us for over 2 hours. I really, really appreciate
This
all
has been fun. We need to do this more often.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
We talked some football. We got into wrestling. Got a little bit of everything. So, Sean, real quick, tell everybody where they can find us, and then we'll ask Bob and John what they are up to and where they can find.
You can follow us on Facebook on the Under the Dome podcast page, or individually. I want to thank everybody that has subscribed to our YouTube channel, and that's another way that you can find us. It's on YouTube. You can follow us on Twitter.
Yeah, my Twitter handles.
I always go to the wrong side first.
I'm getting there.
Yeah. We thank each and every one of you for being a part of what we do. We love doing this so much, and you guys have been a part of our world for 3+ years now. With everything that's been going on, we really didn't do a big anniversary show this year, but next year we're going to blow it up.
COVID. Well, I blame everything on COVID.
Yeah, screws up everything. John, are you working on anything new in terms of Life of a Saint?
Yeah, I just about a week ago just did Chris Ivory. I interviewed Johnny Poe last week, so that one will be coming out in the next week and a half or so. That's actually almost done. So by the time it gets scheduled, probably in the next week or so.
How'd that go?
It was really good, and he gave me some. Yeah, it was better than I expected, and he actually gave me some stuff that he was saying. I've never even told this to anyone before. So stuff about his college coach and some of the things he had to overcome as far as like racial related things and everything. So yeah, it was pretty good stuff. And then the tribute article, which again I do one every year. First year was Sam Mills. Last year was Will Smith. This year is going to be Dave Waymer. So I've already started to gather up a couple of people's statements. I spoke to his wife, his widow at the time. I spoke to Johnny Poe about Dave Waymer while I had him. Toy Cook has already said he's on board, and I'm sure that list is going to grow. That's probably a few months down the road by the time that's all put together. But that's in the works as well. Excuse me.
And again, I can't say enough how strongly that I encourage everybody to take the time to see some of John's work on that series. It is absolutely amazing.
I really appreciate it.
Johnny Poe actually led the Saints in interceptions with 7 back in 1983. So,
yeah, God, I'm sorry.
But I was saying he literally went from the penthouse to the outhouse, because here he is, a starting cornerback leading the Saints in interceptions, and then 3 years later, or 4 years later, he's on his way out the door. He's demoted, playing special teams with the 87 Saints, and that was his last year in the league.
Right.
So it's an unbelievable turnaround in a short time span.
And yeah, what was so cool about that year? I mean, not cool, but interesting about that year was for him. He was personally it was rough for him, taking the demotion and playing through injury and only being in on nickel situations for the most part, but having the team success that New Orleans had never seen before. It was kind of an interesting dynamic that he had that season.
Absolutely. Bob, what's on? Uh-oh.
Well,
did I freeze? Sorry.
You frozen a couple times. Go ahead.
Okay. I was going to say, what are you working on, Bob?
A busy and interesting offseason that we think it's going to be for the New Orleans Saints. John Hendricks and I just finished team tackling New Orleans Saints positional grades for the past 2020 season. And next we're going to slide into year in review, individual player pieces. kind of highlights and maybe a few lowlights too on individual players on both sides of the ball. And then we're going to shift almost immediately into we're kind of intersect those player and review pieces with positional outlooks for the offseason. Draft priority, free agent acquisitions, or pending free agent rumors, things like that. And then before you know it, we're going to blink our eyes, and all of a sudden we're going to be into draft previews again. At the Saints News Network and SI.com, where you can follow the majority of my work. We do a lot more. I think we do a lot more than just mock drafts, because people get sick of mock drafts fast. I get sick of doing them. I try to only do 2 a year. But I really enjoy the individual player profiles, because I get to do the inner coach in me comes out, because I get to study film. And in some cases, I get to make calls to collegiate coaches. Rarely will I get a head coach, but I'll often get a position coach. And like I said, I love to watch film, incorporate how player X might fit into the New Orleans Saints plans, comparatively to what their offseason needs are going to be at a particular position. So I try not to just do potential first round picks either. I try to reach into getting draft gems. And some of my pieces, I've done Arthur Millette. I've done Lyndon Stevens. I know he's a friend of all four of ours.
Mm-hmm.
As potential undrafted guys that could also make an impact. And we know the Saints have had tons of success with undrafted talent. We're going to do some editorial pieces too. The conference call that I had to step away from was for SI and Saints News Network. So I can happily report that I still have a job, at least as of tomorrow. As long as I can hold my viper tongue in check every now and then.
There you go.
You can follow my work, obviously, through Saints News Network, and also on Facebook, Bob Rose, and over on Twitter at BobbyR2613.
Absolutely.
And I strongly encourage everyone to follow Bob's work. There is no more knowledgeable and insightful man covering the New Orleans Saints than Bob Rose.
Absolutely. And Bob, I got a list of local people, UL players, I should say, that my daughter wants you to talk about, because she knows these kids because she worked with them as an athletic trainer, and she thinks very highly of them. And there's a couple of them she would love to see as New Orleans Saints. Yeah, I'm talking about you. She's looking at me through the window right now in the other room, because she's in the kitchen right now. But yeah, quite a few UL players she would love to see in the black and gold.
You know what? Tell her to send me the list.
Okay.
Have her text me. She has some insights. With working with them directly. I love those kind of interviews to incorporate them in some pieces too. So yeah, tell her, reach out to me. Either text or through Facebook. I'm always open.
Absolutely. Now I'm gonna have to get my wife teaches Devery Henderson's daughter, and Devery Henderson's nephew played for UL. So we're gonna have to try and get Devery on this show. I'm working that right now. I'm working that right now. So we'll see what happens. But anyway, thank you guys for sticking with us for so long. Thank you as always, John, for joining us. Bob,
my pleasure.
Really appreciate having you guys on board. And we'll see you next time on Under the Dome. Good night, everybody.